This is going to be our last lesson on solving systems by graphing. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be adding a exponential graph. So we're going to start with a linear, and then what we're going to do is we're going to move to an exponential. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make my XY axis. I'm going to start with my linear equation. Y equals 2 means I go up 2, 1, 2 on the y-axis, and I draw a horizontal line. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to graph my exponential. Now with my exponential, first thing that I need is to find my horizontal asymptote. And my horizontal asymptote is whatever we're adding or subtracting. So in this case, it's 0. So y equals 0 would be my horizontal asymptote. Next thing is I make my table of values, and I'm going to pick -1, 0, and 1. Now, if you remember, if you plug in a -1, it flips the number. So in this case, it becomes a half. Our next one, whenever we plug in a 0, it becomes 1. And when we plug in a 1, it becomes 2. So what we have is -1 and a half, 0, 1, and 1, 2. And that right there is our exponential graph. Now, if we're looking at this, our goal is to see where it intersects. And it intersects right there, which is the ordered pair, 1, 2. Now, looking at our second one, once again, I'm going to start with my linear. This is my linear. Notice that it's not y equals, it's x equals. So that means that instead of a horizontal line, what I'm going to do is I'm going to have a vertical line. So x equals -1. At -1 on the x-axis, I'm drawing my vertical line. Then, for my exponential, what I'm going to do is I'm going to find my horizontal asymptote, which is 0. Once again, because I'm not adding or subtracting anything, that's why it's 0. So at 0, I'm drawing a horizontal asymptote. I'm going to use my same x values. We're going to use -1, 0, and 1. If I plug in a negative, it flips it. So instead of 1/3, I have a 3. Anything to the 0 is a 1. And when I plug in a 1, it stays the same, which is 1/3. So -1 is 3. 0 is 1. 1 is a third. And I have my graph. Now, once again, my answer is where it crosses. So in this case, it would be -1 and 3. Now, looking at the third example, what I have is I have a linear equation. Notice I don't have numbers. That means this is a 1x plus 0. So what that tells me is that my y-intercept is at 0, and it tells me my slope is 1. Meaning what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot a point at 0 because of the 0. And from this point, I'm going to go up 1 to the right 1. I'm going to do it again, up 1 to the right 1 to make sure my line is straight. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to look at my exponential. I notice that I'm subtracting 1, so that tells me my horizontal asymptote is at -1. I'm going to use my same XY chart. I'm going to plug in -1, 0, and 1. When I plug in a -1, it flips it to 1/5. 1/5 minus 1 is -4/5. Anything to the 0 is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. And when I plug in a 1, it stays the same. So 5 minus 1 gives me 4. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to plot the points. So I have -1 and -4/5. I have 0, 0, and I have 1 and 4. Once again, my answer is where it crosses, and I see that it crosses at 0, 0.